Baz went through your. I know you experienced the miscarriage of the baby physically, but you know he's the man you've chosen to be with.
Yeah.
You know, you love him very much, and all the rest of it. What did you notice in Baz after the miscarriage? Was it? It's a rubbish question, Mel, but I'm going to stick with it.
It's really difficult because I don't want to do him a disservice, but it's a very private thing that I went through. So you go to the toilet, you don't generally take someone to the toilet with you, or if you do, it's like three women in a pub going into the toilet room, but you don't go in the cubicle together.
No, no.
So all the bleeding and all the pad changing was me doing that on my own, and I probably wouldn't have included him in that even if he wanted to be, because it's a
No, I
really
get that.
private
Yeah, no,
thing for a woman.
yeah,
Emotionally, I think it took a while for it to kind of affect Baz. I think because we'd only known that we were pregnant for a few days before we weren't pregnant anymore.
yeah,
So he hasn't really spoken about how he got his head around that. But I did find a place online that was providing keepsake kits for people that had miscarried. And they sent us a gift. It came all the way from America. It was a little book, and there was a little pendant charm in there that was just a heart, and he wore that on his necklace for years, and it's still in his wallet now, kind of 8 or 9 years on. So I know that it must have affected him, but I don't think seeing how he was affected by Finley, it was a very, very different. It wasn't as visual, it wasn't as obvious.
yeah. And I know it's politically not correct to talk about differences between the sexes, but I know it's not. But you can get sacked from Google for doing it. But there are self-evident differences in how the male of our species process emotional events.
Yeah,
I think that's self-evident. Yeah, I know it's risky ground, you know, to talk about it, but I think a man will respond in a very different way.
yeah, and it was really obvious with when we lost Finley. So he focused on looking after me and making sure that I was okay.
Yeah,
And so did everyone else. To be honest, nobody really checked in to see how he was at all.
no,
And about 6 months into losing Finley, actually Baz had a breakdown. He just couldn't cope any longer. He'd been strong for so long that he eventually just broke down, and we couldn't find him any support. So we went to the doctor. The doctor gave him a prescription for sleeping tablets.
yeah,
And then the next time we went to the doctor gave him a referral for anger management. And he was like, but I'm angry because my baby died. Like, I don't need to go and sit in a group of angry men. I need help. And
yeah,
there was no help available for him at all. Even we went through crews, and because of where we live and because there wasn't very many volunteers at the time, they matched him with a man, but this man had lost his 80-year-old wife.
yeah,
And it was a completely different relationship, a completely different grief, completely different generations, that they just
yeah.
had nothing in common.
Yeah, so, I, and I'm very conscious that Baz isn't here. But so, where did Baz find support in the end?
Through doing ridiculous things for charity, I think is the
Right.
best answer. So he
Yeah.
threw himself into getting fit, and he used to do extreme mud runs like the Tough Mudder or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that was his way of doing something in Finley's memory.
Yeah.
Um, and he really, friends, I think, were very
Yeah.
supportive to him. So quite often they'd just take him down the pub and make sure that he's all right.
Yeah.
And it's only now, actually, in the last probably 2 years, that he's been talking much more openly and talking much more about the things that he went through in that experience. Because I know what I lived through and what I remember, but actually he has a very different memory of the same event.
Yeah. And does Baz get involved in your workshops yet?
No, he's very shy. He doesn't do kind of public speaking. He comes along to the Butterfly Awards each year. He does a lot of the carting and lifting and setting up, but
Mm.
actually he really enjoys the Butterfly Awards because there's quite often a group of men that gather that have lost their babies and outside, and he kind of is able to talk to the men about their experiences.
Yeah.
And we
Well,
were also we took part in the film Still Loved, which was out. It was made a couple of years ago, and
okay.
that film is a documentary that's made by a Sheffield-based film company, and it followed 7 families through the aftermath of losing a baby, and it's a really really important film that no broadcasting company would show because of the topic, of what it was covering. The BBC, Channel 5, none of them would pick it up and show it at all. And it's actually 90 minutes of beautiful documentary into the family's life.
Where's it available now, Mel?
It's available. You can download it through stilllove.com, I think is their website. They've got their own website. You can get it on DVD. It's available on Amazon as well.
We'll put the link along with this discussion.
Yeah,
And
that would be great. But that was a really interesting experience for us because it was the first thing that Baz and I had done together. So it was filming both of us, and the film does a really good job of capturing the dad's perspective.
yeah,
Um, and there was a really lovely moment where we all got together for a memorial event, and all of the dads went outside for a cigarette, and we had mics on, and the cameras were still filming. And there's just this moment where this dad goes, "Well, it's just shit, isn't it?" And it's just like blatant, really obvious. And he just comes out and says it, and it's like, actually, that is the way it is. There's no sugarcoating this experience.
nah,
But
nah,
Baz had never been in that situation where somebody else was able to say exactly how he was feeling.
yeah,
And it's actually a clip that's in the film, and it's just a beautiful moment.
yeah. I
There's
did
been
no. I don't think anyone would deny that women benefit from being with other women
yeah,
in context of sharing their life and talking through stuff for talking's sake, right? Talking itself feels good inside a woman's neurophysiology.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I think it's equally true that men need men, and
yeah,
and it's not for the exact same reasons that women need women. Men are looking for a mild challenge in the context of a relationship with another man.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that banter, that kind of edge on
Yeah,
being
and
together.
the men that I've met that have lost a baby, they'll often talk about, nobody asked me how I was, nobody looked after me,
Yeah,
nobody checked how I was doing, and what was there anything that I needed. But
yeah,
then when you ask them, well, what do you need? Because obviously
nothing.
we run a charity, they
Yeah,
can't tell you what they need
no,
because
no,
they
they'll
know
say,
that they don't want to go and sit in a support group and have a cup of
oh
tea
God,
and a cake.
I
They know they don't want to do that. But the
no,
best that we've come up with in the charity is, let's go and sit in a pub,
yeah,
go and sit in a pub and have a few drinks and play a game of pool. And then they kind of, the chat happens, but it
yeah,
happens around an activity where the
yeah.
focus is not on the talking.
No, I get that because I mean, this is my kind of take on the evolutionary biology, that there is a benefit in the talking itself for a woman because of oxytocin rising.
Yeah,
In a man, talking tends to be focused on coming to a conclusion.
yeah,
It's concluding the talking with a result that testosterone gets generated. So it's
yeah,
a very
yeah,
different dynamic, very
yeah.
different dynamic.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So about every 2 months I get referred a man. Usually they get sent to me by a woman.
Yeah,
Usually, um, and the numbers are growing. And the work that I do, I never charge for one-to-one work with anyone.
yeah,
Uh, and I remember I had a man ring me, and this wasn't about loss. It was about a birth experience that for him had been traumatic.
yeah,
And it had taken him 3 weeks just to ring me. You know, it's taken him a long time to
Yeah,
be in a position where he was talking about what was going on for him. And I think there probably is a much bigger number of men that could do with support, but are not ready to say so.
definitely, definitely. And if we're I don't mind shamelessly plugging a couple of guys, but if you're
Do
looking for influential baby loss fathers to learn from, there's a really amazing guy called David Monteith who is sharing his story. He speaks at public events.
Yeah.
He's on Instagram and online, and he's got some amazing anecdotes. So he actually chose to dig his own baby's grave after her stillbirth
Wow.
because
What's his? No.
David Monteith,
Okay.
he runs something called Grace in Action.
We'll put his link as well.
Yeah,
And
and he talks really powerfully about some of the choices and the decisions that he made. But they actually had a water birth, so they found out that their baby had died, and they already had a plan for a water birth. So the midwife supported them to have a water birth as a stillbirth, which is one of the only times I've heard.
I've not heard of that.
The only people that I've heard have been able to do that.
Yeah.
It's one of the points that we bring up on my study days really often is there's a sense from professionals that there's a risk, and when you kind of drill down to it, what is the risk? What are you concerned about?
What, a risk of having a stillbirth in water?
Well, the stillbirth is considered a high risk situation, and you
Right.
can't have a water birth if you're high risk, if your pregnancy is high risk.
Right.
But when you kind of drill down into it, like what actually is the risk? Because there's no risk to the baby. The baby's already dead. Is
Yeah.
there a risk to mum of infection? Well, maybe there is, but you
Maybe.
can monitor that. But
Yeah.
if a mum has chosen a home birth and she wants water as part of her labour and part of her birthing process, it feels like when you're told your baby's died, it feels like you have no choices left anymore. It feels like all of your choices are taken away from you. And someone who's invested greatly into planning and preparing for a water birth, it can be really devastating to lose that birth experience, not only because the baby's dead, but because nobody's thought to offer you the things that are on your birth plan. And
Yeah.
David and Siobhan talk about that really powerfully, and that's something that I'd like to see more widely kind of recognized in professionals, is actually we can spend time looking at people's birth plans. We've got a moment after they find out their baby's died, there's a couple of days at home where they don't see anybody, they don't speak to anybody, but they're almost in a sense of shock, and they're protected in some ways. So before you start labour, you've got those 2 days where actually you could be talking about what do
Yeah.
you want this labour to be? How do you want to act? What do you want
Yeah.
from this process? And it's
Yeah.
kind of a missed opportunity.
Absolutely. And for some people they wouldn't want it, but for others they would. And if we think back to, you know, every human being's living inside a story about their lives.
Yeah,
Everyone, we can't stop it. It's the human condition. And that opens up the possibility of the story being shaped in a
yeah.
way that enhances life rather than, you know, detracts. It's very lovely.
And one of the points that I share on my study days all the time is around, just because the baby's died doesn't mean the baby isn't loved, and just because the birth
Mm,
isn't what you planned for it to be doesn't mean it can't be beautiful. It
mm,
absolutely can be still filled with beauty and love. It's
mm.
just in a different way than what you planned and hoped for in the first place.